The now demolished Fisher Hall at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, was once the location of a mysterious disappearance in bizarre circumstances. Fisher Hall was an imposing three-storey building that was first built in 1862 as the Oxford Female College. Unfortunately, the college failed and folded with the demise of its founder in 1882. It was then used as a mental asylum run by Dr. George F. Cook until 1925, when the building became part of Miami University and was used as a men's dormitory. It was during this time that a strange incident took place which still literally haunts the university now. On an unusually cold day on April 19, 1953, 19-year-old sophomore Ronald Tammen Jr. had just come from playing bass fiddle with a college dance band called the Campus Owls. Returning to his second-story dorm room, number 225, at around 8 p.m, he planned to do some studying before retiring for the night. However, there was a hitch in his plans when he found that someone had placed a dead fish between his sheets. Tammen went to the hall manager and requested fresh linen. Some of his fellow residents waved to him as he walked back to his room, carrying the clean sheets. At 9:30 p.m, Tammen's roommate got back to find the door to the dorm room open and the radio playing, but no Tammen. Tammen's watch, wallet, keys, high school class ring and other personal items were lying on the desk. An open textbook was also placed there, so that his roommate assumed that he'd just stepped out for a short time and would return soon. Curiously, it was a psychology textbook, and Tammen had actually dropped his psychology course 3 weeks earlier, suggesting that its placement was staged. Tammen was never to return. One account says that sometime around 8:30 p.m, Tammen was apparently disturbed by something outside of his room and went out into the hallway to investigate. When his roommate found him gone, he assumed that Tammen was sleeping over at his Delta Tau Delta fraternity house and did not report his absence until the next day. Over the next week, it became clear that something had gone very wrong for the young student. Tammen was a popular and personal figure at Miami. As well as his musical participation, he was a resident assistant on his dorm floor and a varsity wrestler. It seemed unthinkable for a student in such good financial and academic standing to vanish of his own accord. Tammen's gold 1938 Chevrolet sedan was still in its spot in the school parking lot, with his bass fiddle in the back seat. He left behind $200 in his bank account and probably had no more than $10 to $15 on him the night he disappeared. One terrifying thought was that the building's ghosts were responsible. Even then, the dormitory at Fisher Hall was thought to be very haunted. Apart from the wandering spirit of the building's namesake, Judge Elam Fisher, it's used as a Victorian-era mental asylum from 1882 to 1925, was said to have produced restless ghosts of the patients from this time. The people residing there would report eerie sounds, shadows slipping past windows, and objects strangely vanishing and later reappearing in plain sight. Straitjackets were sometimes randomly found. Given Tammen's uncharacteristic disappearance, it was theorized that he had experienced a sudden onset of mental illness within the ominous environment. In the investigation of Tammen's disappearance, some odd revelations came to light. A woman in a neighbouring town reported that on the night he went missing, a young man matching his description knocked on her door at about midnight asking what town he was in and for directions to the nearest bus stop. She described him as appearing dazed and dishevelled, with empty eyes, a streak of dirt across his face, and wearing no coat, which she found strange given the freezing temperature. This sighting led to a theory that Tammen had suffered a turn of dissociative amnesia. It also supported one suggestion that it had fallen victim to a hazing ritual for his fraternity, Delta Tau Delta. Fitting into this scenario, Tammen's new pillowcase was missing from his room. Did he simply forget to take one while fetching clean sheets, or had it been used to hood him? It was not uncommon for an initiate to be kidnapped, then dropped off at some distant location and told to find their way back. Another strange detail emerged when the Hamilton County coroner disclosed that Tammen had attended his office to request a test for blood type 5 months before his disappearance. The coroner had never had such a request in his 40 years of experience and thought it odd because Tammen could have easily obtained a blood test from the medical clinic on campus rather than drive to Hamilton. This raised the question of whether he had unintentionally impregnated a woman friend and the repercussions had caused him to flee. An unsettling incident on a November night in 1953, 7 months after Tammen's disappearance, for some reason became linked with the case. Students had returned to campus after Thanksgiving break and were sitting inside when the sound of a young man singing burst out across the college grounds. A group of students went outside to find the noisy singer, but found no one. Suddenly, a tall, thin figure dressed in all white appeared from the bushes, and the group gave chase. The eerie apparition easily outpaced them with what was reported as superhuman speed before disappearing into the woods. Mysterious incidents such as this, thought to be connected with the missing Tammen, earned him the nickname the Phantom of Oxford. On 2 occasions in 1973 and later in 1975, a student group invited a spiritualist to Fisher Hall to hold a séance that might help shed light on the whereabouts of the missing man. In both instances, the medium reported seeing a young man studying in his room when he heard a noise which disturbed him. He descended to the basement to investigate, where he encountered 2 men, one of whom struck him from behind. Both the mediums ended their visions at that point, not providing any insights. In 1958, the upper floors of Fisher Hall were classified as unsafe and closed off, with only the first floor continuing to be used as a theatre space. Throughout this time, staff would claim to hear disembodied footsteps and muffled voices resounding from empty halls. Visitors to the area would sense that someone had walked into the room with them, while the shadowy figures and eerie displacement of personal objects continued. In 1968, the whole building was abandoned, and 10 years later, it was demolished to make way for the new Markham Conference Centre. Unexplained phenomena are still reported in the new building, which is incidentally named after a victim of a tragic car accident that now sits on the site of the former Fisher Hall. Nearly 70 years later, Ronald Henry Tammen Jr. is still missing, and authorities have never found any remains or indication of foul play in his disappearance. Some anomalies in this cold case continue to perplex. For a start, investigators did not believe Tammen could have been forcibly abducted, and he was well built and strong enough to defend himself against most attackers. The theory of his going along with a prank or hazing stunt still does not explain why Ronald never got home, unless it backfired, wherein no evidence was ever discovered. It was found that the bus line had suspended its midnight run, so he could not have caught a bus home, but still would have been located. 2 other theories have been explored by police. The favoured one was that Tammen suffered a bout of amnesia. However, why he was never found wandering remains a question. A sudden onset of schizophrenia has also been suggested, though there was no known mental health issues before his disappearance. Another theory is that Tammen skipped town in order to start a new life. It was implied that the strange blood typing test he had requested was actually a paternity test, and that he had been scared off by the thought of becoming a father so young. Although at the time he vanished he did not have a steady girlfriend, this theory is supported by the complete success of his disappearance. Fisher Hall, Ronald's dorm, was demolished in 1978, and the rubble was extensively examined for his remains, but no clues were uncovered. His parents, who testified at the time that he did not appear to be troubled about anything, have passed away, along with many other potential witnesses. Jennifer Wenger, a Miami University alumnus, started researching Tammen's disappearance in 2010 and devoted 9 years to attempting to solve his cold case. She believes that Tammen lived on for an extended period after vanishing, possibly as long as 42 years, which would date his passing sometime around 1995. She came to this conclusion on the basis that the FBI discarded Tammen's fingerprint records in 2002. Regulations permit them to destroy fingerprint records 7 years after a person's demise. Wenger's surprising theory is that Tammen's psychology professor was a CIA operative and that Tammen may have been recruited into the agency. Her second suggestion was that Tammen was used by the CIA in an experimental hypnosis trial. She believes government agencies, like the FBI, withheld information from the family coming from the investigation. With the passing of time, Ronald Tammen's fate may never be revealed. His youngest two siblings are still alive and hoping for answers in his unsolved case. For decades after Tammen's disappearance, students at Miami University continued to cite his ghost within Fisher Hall. Still fascinated by his story, current students claim that his spirit inhabits the building that now sits on the side of the dorm.